This tutorial is for 3rd grade, Module 6, Lesson 1. In Module 6, the students will begin their study of data. In other words, we'll be looking at graphing information. The first lesson deals with using tally marks to survey people. The first question says, what is your favorite color? Survey the class to complete the tally chart below. So I've given an example of what that tally chart might look like if a student went around and asked other students what their favorite color was. One thing that we need to note on this is when we use tally marks, every group of 5, the 5th tally mark is slashed through that group to show that it is a group of 5. This makes it easier to count quickly. So if I look at my totals, I can see that there are 4 for green, 2 for yellow, 7, 5 plus 2 for red, 10 for blue, and 2 for orange. The next section is asking questions about the tally chart. The first question said, which color did students choose the most? How many students chose it? And I wrote blue was chosen the most by 10 students. Question B says, which color did students choose the least? How many students chose it? Well, there was a tie for that. Yellow and orange were both chosen the least by 2 students. Question C says, write a number sentence to show the difference between the number of students in questions A and B. So since there were 10 students who chose blue, and I'll subtract the 2 students who chose yellow, the difference is 8 students. And question D says, write an equation to show the total number of students surveyed on this chart. So we had 4 students for green, 2 for yellow, 7 for red, 10 for blue, and 2 for orange. And I'm going to combine some of these numbers to add them easily. So if I say 2 and 2 is 4, plus 4 is 8, plus 7 is 15, plus 10 is 25. So there were a total of 25 students who would have taken this survey. Now we're going to take our information from our tally chart and turn it into a picture graph. The key to a picture graph is the legend, or this little section down here. For this graph, it says each heart will represent 1 student. So I look back at how many students chose each color, and for each student I'm going to draw 1 heart. So for green, there were 4 students who chose green, so I'm going to draw 4 hearts. For yellow, we had 2 students, so I'll draw 2 hearts. Red had 7 students. Blue had 10 students. And orange had 2 students. And again, that key was important. Each heart represents 1 student. We're going to do the same thing on this chart, but if you notice, now the key says each heart represents 2 students. So every time we draw a heart, that will represent 2 instead of 1. So if I go back to green, green had 4 students. That would be 2 hearts because each heart represents 2 students. So I'd have 2, 4 students. For yellow, we needed 2 students, so that would just be 1 heart. Red was 7 students, so if I draw 1 heart, that's 2. A second heart would be 4. A third heart would be 6. Well, I need 7, so I'm going to draw a half of a heart to represent my 7th student. For blue, we had 10 students, so I'll draw 5 hearts. And orange had 2 students, so that would just be 1 heart. Now I'll answer a couple of questions about that last picture graph that we drew. The first question says, what does each heart represent? Well, if you remember, each heart represented 2 students in the second graph that we drew. Question B says, how would you represent 3 students in the chart that we did in problem 3B? And again, one heart represented 2 students, so we would draw 1 heart for 2 students and a half of a heart for 1 student. So 2 and 1 would equal 3. And we have 2 more questions. This one says, how many students does blank represent in problem 3b, looking at all of these hearts? Well, I can see that there are 7 hearts, and again, each heart represented 2 students in that second picture graph. So we'll say 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2. That would give me my 7 hearts. Each heart represents 2 students, so that would be a total of 14 students. Or I could also write it as 7 times 2, or 7 groups of 2, would equal 14 students. My final question says, how many more hearts did you draw for the color that students chose the most than for the color that students chose the least? Well, there were 10 students who chose blue, and we drew 5 hearts to represent the 10 students, since each heart was worth 2 students. And then there were 2 students who chose yellow or orange, and we drew 1 heart to represent the 2 students. So that means we drew 4 more students for the blue than we did for the orange or for the yellow. So I'll say I drew 4 more hearts to show how many more I drew for the blue than I did for the yellow or the orange.